Lessons from the screen, what we mean is we go through different documentaries to tell you what they gon' do. Give you our lessons, give them our blessings. If they trash, we tell you there is no second guessing. Knowledge is power, but time is precious. And we're here to keep you from them lessons. So sit back as we groove, giving you the review, so you only spend time on the dots that you need to. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons from the Screen. You know what it is, the show where we give you a review of whether or not a show, a documentary, anything that you can get through any particular digital medium is worth your time. We waste our time, our energy, and our brain power so that you don't have to. You're welcome. Lessons from the Screen is brought to you by Paxing through the Freedom Train Network. You can find us at www.freedomtrainradio.com or on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Stitcher. I like Stitcher. I said that last week. I'm going to say it again. I like Stitcher. Go check us out on Stitcher if you don't want to go to the website, but you should go to the website. Drop us a line. Leave us a review on the website, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on iTunes. Go to all four places. Leave a comment. Leave a review. Let them know. Let's go. Anyways, be sure while you're on the internet, while you're doing all that, to head to www.pactinc.org. That's paxinc.org to show some love and support for our sponsors. Pax Inc. is a black activist and advocacy organization focused on developing the black community through a shift in culture, education, and economics. As always, Lessons from the Screen has a frame of reference and perspective that is aligned with that of the black community. So the things we look at will be looked at with the racial component involved and with some lessons that can be used to improve the community. During this episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will be jumping into Trump's address. He addressed the nation on March 19th, talking about the opioid crisis. We're going to be talking about what this could potentially mean for black people, as well as some of the differences and similarities between the old war on drugs and the new war on drugs. We will give you some of the key points, and then we will give you our opinion of those points and of the speech in general. In this week's episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will be addressing the new war on drugs. Now, an interesting note here is that the backdrop to Trump's speech is a deep blue tinted mural of people with the words opioids, the crisis next door in big bold white letters. So that's the backdrop that he's standing in front of. And after a standard round of thanking politicians and the Trumpian round of thanking law enforcement agencies, because, you know, he's tough, minus, of course, the intelligence agencies, and with a particularly special emphasis on those that work directly with keeping immigrants out of the country. So we're talking about Border Patrol, we're talking about ICE and various things like that. He thanked law enforcement agencies for protecting Americans, keeping out drugs, and holding the line against criminals. He moved into his speech with compassion for the victims of opioids and their families. Now, the next point, after he did all that, he began with his very strong language, because, you know, he's a very strong guy. In very strong tonation, he declared that the scourge of addiction in this country will stop. He said that strong, very strong. He followed it up with a statistic, and this one is actually true. That's why I'm going to repeat it, because it's so rare that we get anything true from this president, or at least true in the sense of not only is it factually right, but it's contextually accurate. Because sometimes he'll say things and they might be factually right, but they'll be contextually misleading. But in this case, that wasn't the case. So he said that every day 116 Americans die from an opioid-related overdose. And he followed up that little bit of truth by saying, declaring, mind you, that we will raise a generation of children free from addiction. He then moved on and spoke about the 70,000 plus illegal immigrants tried and convicted on drug-related charges. He spoke about Operation Granite Shield, which, for those of you who don't know, It was a statewide drug operation in New Hampshire, which is one of the worst affected states when it comes to the opioid crisis. And after months of work, they arrested more than 150 people, captured close to 18,000 doses of heroin and fentanyl, worth about $22,000, 24 weapons, $37,000 in cash, as well as other drugs. Now, the operation was a coordination of 88 local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and the program cost over $1 million to run. He spoke about getting tough on drug dealers, spoke on utilizing the death penalty, framed the discussion as he told the story about drug dealers being able to kill thousands and thousands of people and only getting 30 days in jail. And he spoke to winning the battle and not wanting to leave in 7 years and still having the problem. The obvious assertion there is that he's going to win a second term. And he spoke on a three-pronged approach focusing on prevention, law enforcement, and education. So some of the things that he talked about doing, wanting to do, having already done, various other things, as he spoke about reducing the demand by preventing addiction, to include coming up with painkillers that aren't addictive. And at this point, he brought up his first set of human props, who talked about their kid, and they all called him a kid. He had a degree in actuarial science, found some leftover painkillers in his parents' kitchen drawer, and got addicted and later died of an overdose. He talked about addressing the problem of overprescribing. He wants to cut nationwide prescriptions by a third over the next year and bring federal cases against pharmaceutical companies spending money on commercials that vilify drug use. Now, I know I said that kind of weird, and that's because my brain is operating kind of funky right now. He doesn't want to bring federal cases against drug companies that are spending money on commercials. Those are two separate points. He wants to bring federal cases. He's talking about maybe, I don't say he wants to, I'll say he's talking about maybe bringing federal cases against pharmaceutical companies that create, manufacture, and distribute addictive drugs. And he is also talking about spending money on commercials that basically vilify drug use. Like, you know, we used to have the old, I don't know if all of you guys are old enough to remember this, and I'm sure a lot of you are, the whole "this is your brain," and then they crack the egg, and then they put the egg in a skillet that's frying hot, and they scramble the egg a little bit, and they say, "This is your egg on brain on drugs. Any questions?" Stuff like that just vilify drugs and make people not want to do drugs anymore. He's launching a new website. The government is launching a new website, crisisnextdoor.gov, where Americans can share their experiences with drugs and drug addiction. He's talking about reducing the supply of illicit drugs, and this is where he made a sharp pivot to what he likes to talk about most, which is building the wall. He spoke to the fact that 90% of the heroin comes through our southern border, and he wants to build a wall, at which point the New Hampshire audience started to chant, "Build the wall, build that wall, build the wall," or "build that wall," or something along those lines. It was silly to me. Anyways, he attacked sanctuary cities and accused them of protecting criminals, and talked about Lawrence, Massachusetts in particular, which is a sanctuary city. He says supplies fentanyl to 6 cities in New Hampshire. Talked about MS-13 having 15 members arrested in Lawrence. And then he brought up his second human prop, which was an ICE agent that helped uncover the drug operation in Lawrence, Massachusetts. He talked about shutting down illegal digital marketplaces that bring in drugs from places like China. Go figure, he mentions China. Said that if we're nice, we won't have a country left. And spoke about bringing back the death penalty. Said that he had heard from other countries who have told him that they kill their drug dealers so they don't have a drug problem. Of course, he never bothered to mention who those countries were, but he spoke about actions against manufacturers, but didn't define what those actions might be. He talked about getting life-saving help to those that need it, praised Adapt Pharma for creating Narcan, an opioid overdose drug. They provide 4 boxes free to every college in the U.S. and 2 boxes free to every high school in the U.S. And the vast majority of drug overdoses in the U.S. happen at home, not at school. So I guess everything is something. He spoke about increasing treatment options and also talked about making prescription drugs more affordable. I'm not quite sure what that has to do with getting the opioid thing under control. It seems like it might make it worse if you make them cheaper, but